you for being here today. We hope that you're all doing well, and we thank you so much for being present to our event today. So before starting, I'm quickly going to present myself. So my name is Penelope, and I am a project manager at Astee. And it's a pleasure to meet everybody and discuss around this topic today. So you're here for our webinar entitled Microplastics in Water, Understanding, Measuring, and Taking Action. So firstly, we wanted to present to you the three organizations who prepared this webinar so that everything is a bit more clear for you, because there's a lot of logos on the slide so that you can just understand a little bit. So firstly, the first one that we have is Astee. So can you see my slide moving? Yes. So Astee is the Association of Water and Waste Management Professionals here in France. It mainly operates through commissions that you can see on the slide. So we have all the thematics that are being studied and who are being treated by our volunteers inside this association. We also have a strong focus on careers, profession, and young professionals, mainly through our group that we call the Groupe Jeune Pro, which is aimed at people between the ages of 18 and 35 years old. So the main goal is to build a connection between the young professionals and the experts in the water and waste sector, because here in France, we have a huge problem is that there is a lack of communication and a lack of a link in between these two parties. So that's our main goal. This group works at a national level, so on the French territory. And to make sure that we also access the international dimension, Astee collaborates with the International Water Association. For that, we are members of the French chapter that we call the Young Water Professional French chapter, so that you understand. And now I would let Lina present the association and the chapter.
Hi everyone, so I'm Lina Saoudi. I'm the chair of the International Water Association for France, but there is like a higher group of it. So the IWA itself is an association with more than 10,000 global members, with 75 years of existence, and is present in more than 100 countries. There is especially the Young Water Professional Group, which counts a global estimation of 1,000 global members in more than 50 countries, and they host more than 5 annual events. Concerning France, we're currently 16 members, and it was established in 2022 by the Groupe Jeune Pro of the Astee that you saw earlier. So it's quite a new group. The activities that we do are, for example, on our LinkedIn page, we post monthly news about water in general. So we animate this. We are also take part in engagement in youth-led water policies. For example, we were invited last year in the UNESCO for the Glacier Day to host a pitch on it. And for example, we do webinars as we are doing today. So our last webinar was about the current issues in water quality measurements. And today we're here for a new one. So thank you for listening. And I let the floor to Laura and Alma for the VSA.
Yes, so hi, I'm Alma from the VSA Young Professionals, which is actually the VSA is the Swiss Association of Wastewater and Water Protection Professionals for the whole field of integrated wastewater management here in Switzerland, which is an association that exists since 1944 and reunites experts across the whole water cycle here in Switzerland to define the state of the art, for the whole integrated water management field, and acts as a national reference by also partnering with the different authorities here in Switzerland for this field. And it is active across all different Swiss regions with more than 1,000 members. And there is then the Young Water Professionals Group, which, if you can, yeah, thank you, which was founded in 2019, and it aims at connecting early career professionals and young experts, and promote professional exchange and foster potential for innovation and development within the young professionals. And this goes through the organization of different events. And so Laura, here present, and myself are the ones which organize the partnership with the Astee and the IWA Young Professionals French chapter to organize joint events with friends. And just maybe to present some of the events that we do is that we do technical excursions and workshops to connect young professionals within themselves and also with experts higher up in the water sector, and also organize some other regular informal gatherings to promote the networking. And so now I let Laura introduce the webinar itself.
Yes, thank you. And hello to all of you from my side as well. So we are very pleased to have this webinar together. I will give a short introduction about microplastics, just that everybody is on the same page. So we are talking about plastic particles smaller than 5 millimeter that are present in the environment, especially in water, soil, or in the air. They have been an emerging topic since the 2000s when they first also entered the scientific research. And around 2010, there were research and publications that grew quite rapidly, highlighting their presence in oceans, rivers, and soils. And only between 2015 and 2020, the global awareness around them increased. Microplastic became a subject of public and political debate, with many, many studies focusing on the impact on water, on the air, but also on the food chain. And at the more international level, the regulation of microplastic in water is still in an early stage of development. Currently, there is no binding universal health-based threshold for microplastics in water. But the World Health Organization is strongly emphasizing the need for further research, particularly on long-term health effects. And in parallel, several international and regional also initiatives are underway to better understand and regulate microplastics. They are actively working on harmonizing definitions, monitoring methods, and risk assessment frameworks. So in this webinar, we explore solutions to address microplastic at the source, and we will discuss methods for their quantification in wastewater treatment plants. So we are very pleased and very happy to welcome our two speakers of the day, Grace Nemer from Ohio in Cleveland, who will share insight into how CLEANR has engineered a solution for household laundry wastewater to tackle this type of pollutants, and also Guillaume Crosset-Perrotin that will share insights from his ongoing PhD, his research on microplastic measurement in Swiss wastewater treatment plants. Maybe from my side, just a few technical points before I hand over to Grace. You are free to ask questions. After each presentation, we have a 5-minute time for question and answer session. And we will give the priority to questions from participants in the room that are together with Lina, and also to those raising their hand in Teams. There is a function you can raise your hand. And also, when you're asking a question, it is nice if you can switch on your camera if you like. And if we run out of time, the additional questions can be submitted via the chat in Teams, and they will be addressed from our speakers later by email. We will do this work together. So now, I hope you will enjoy the two presentations, and I hand over to you, Grace.
Thank you for that introduction. It's great to be here, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share, hopefully, my slides. Let me know if you guys can see them okay. Is this the right presenter view? Can you guys see everything?
Yep.
Maybe that one?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. Fantastic. Well, my name is Grace Nemer. I'm here with CLEANR. We are based out of Cleveland, Ohio in the US. And we started a goal as a company to help reduce microplastic emission and pollution in our environment, and to help make sustainability effortless or as easy as possible for consumers. So our first product on the market is a microplastic filter for washing machines. So today I'll walk you guys through a little bit about how we came up with that product, and some of the limitations and strengths of where we got to go. So we already had a brief overview of microplastics, but again, they are less than 5 millimeters in size, and they can be different shapes, like human manufactured cylindrical pellets, or they could be microfibers, like from clothing, which is a big topic I'll talk about today. And they're currently being found pretty much everywhere that scientists have tested. So that includes the bottom of the Mariana Trench, or the lowest point on the planet, and the top of Mount Everest, so the highest point. And these things are plastic, so they don't biodegrade and they will persist in the environment. And with a lot of the new research that's coming out, there's been correlation to ecosystem and environmental risks, and also to human health. The studies are relatively new, so there's no proof points yet, but they are definitely a general concern among the population. So the largest source of microplastics is textiles on our clothing. I know you all in Europe don't have as many dryers, but in the US we have dryers, and all of these dryers have lint filters for the clothes, and you kind of have to clean that lint filter after every cycle, and this big ball of fuzz or lint comes off, and that's the same shed that happens in the washing machine. And 60 to 70% of our clothing these days is made of plastic. I've been doing some research as well, because even the clothes that are natural fibers, like cotton, wool, or linen, are often coated with synthetic dyes or toxic coatings. Cotton is not bright red. It doesn't stay the size it's supposed to stay. It shrinks with heat. Maybe it sets on fire. So all of these manipulations have to be made to our natural clothing in order for us to wear it, and for it to last and look the way we want. And all of these clothes then shed off when they're in the washing machine. And there's currently no regulation on pollution from washing machines, where these textiles shed into the water. And there's no built-in filter to handle this type of microplastic pollution. Other sources of microplastic pollution can be seen here on the screen, including car tires or personal care products, or even those macroplastics like plastic water bottles. But when we, CLEANR, as a company, heard that synthetic textiles were the first source and the largest, we kind of wanted to dive into that issue. So one of the co-founders, Max, took a cup and put it on the end of his washing machine with a little piece of mesh. They wanted to be able to see, can we see what's coming out of the washing machine? And ultimately, the pressure from the washing machine popped that cup filter off and ended up flooding a little bit of his apartment, but they were able to see that there was actually stuff in the water coming out of the washing machine. And ultimately, that's what inspired CLEANR to get started. So as Max saw during that initial test, stuff is coming off, and there have been studies recently that have estimated exactly how much stuff. So it's estimated that 700,000 to over 1 million microfibers are shed per wash. And as I mentioned, 60 to 70% of these are probably inherently plastic, and those that are even natural are likely coated in some sort of plastic or toxic coating. And it happens every time we do laundry. You can see here, this image in the top left is actually my orange sweater. And when you go ahead and put it under a microscope, you can see all those individual fibers. And then this bottom graphic is a video just to show how these fibers are moving through our water. And again, all of this here is done with a microscope, so a lot of times this isn't always visible to our human eye. And the reason that laundry is such a concern is because it tumbles around in the washing machine. Washing machines are not smooth on the inside, they're rough. So the clothing gets broken down over time. And then those microplastics shed either go to your wastewater treatment plant, which we'll hear a little bit about from our second speaker, or for those who have personal septic systems. I know those are pretty big in the US, but a lot of wastewater uses settlement, so microplastics can either float or sink. While there is some filtration, which you'll hear about from our next presenter, there is so much laundry that's being done in the world, from every university or college or school, to athletic teams, to personal homes, to hospitals. The the amount of laundry that sheds with every person doing laundry pretty much every week adds up into our environment. So while wastewater treatment plants get some, others do end up escaping into our oceans, rivers, lakes, which ultimately goes into our water and our food chain. And then even scarier, a lot of times in wastewater plants, microplastics will settle into what is called sludge. So that's all the heavy stuff that goes out of your washing machine or your toilet or your sink in your home. And all of that sludge is often collected in the US and used as fertilizer. So these microplastics are directly input into our soil, which means they end up in our produce, our food, and ultimately can reach our bodies. So CLEANR as a company was figuring out how can we capture microplastics at the source, and how do we make a filter that is easy for a person in a regular home to use while still making an impact on the environment. So that was our product goal and our research question that ultimately led us into different areas of filtration. So when you think about standard filtration, you'll see here on the left, there is dead end filtration. So that means that there's media and there's stuff going through it. And that's typically how a coffee filter works, for example. However, when that happens, all of that stuff is being caught on the same surface that water needs to push through. So dead end filters clog very quickly. That is essentially what we did when we first put a cup and a small piece of filter media onto an outlet of a washing machine, and it did not work very well. Could not even finish one washing cycle. The second most common area of filtration is cross-flow. So this is similar to dead end. You have media, except this time the water with the particulate flows perpendicular to the media, parallel to the media, which does help extend lifetime, except you need a very large surface area for this method of filtration to work, because eventually it will clog over time. So these were two areas of filtration that CLEANR as a company ultimately looked into. However, they did not work for the washing machine application. They required too much maintenance and cleaning, and they clogged too frequently. So some research led us to an article that looked at biomimicry, or inspiration from nature. And when you think about fish and other marine life that swim and have gills, they are intaking water and food and other particulate that's in the ocean, and they have to make sure that their gills don't clog. So the way that their gill structures and bones in their mouths work is they form small vortices or mini tornadoes to help clean off the gills so that they don't clog. So that's what led to the CLEANR vortex. So this is a little bit of a deep dive into our vortex here. But you can see on the left, we ended up developing this shape that looks like a spiral, and did some computational fluid modeling on it. And you can see that we're forming as the water pushes into the vortex, hitting a rib, like the bone structure in the fish's mouth, and forming a vortex. So what this does is it helps to clean off the filter media and also pushes the majority of the microplastics or captured particulate down to one central collection point. So you'll see what this actually looks like here in application in one more slide, but this is just where we as a company started looking at how can we clean a filter without someone actually having to take it apart and clean it. And you can see there's also something, technically speaking, called a Raker reduction ratio. So it's the size of the vortex. So how far out does the bone or the rib go compared to how far in can the vortex fit? How much space does it have? So ultimately, we tested different ratios of this value. Basking sharks, which is one of the mammals and marine life that we took inspiration from, have a Raker reduction ratio of around 2. And through our original research, our vortex is currently sitting around 3 to 4. And we've done some other modeling of that as well. So what this looks like in practice here is that the microplastics enter the vortex at the wide end. They spin around and form these tiny little vortices all the way down. And as I mentioned, it's inspired by marine life. And then you'll see here in a second, these tiny vortices push the majority of the microplastics down to one central collection point, which is on the right of the screen here. That's our CLEANR pod. So ultimately, this is the core technology that was biomimicry inspired that we use for our washing machine filter. So microplastics come in, they see a rib in front of them, and they start spinning, 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 all the way down to the central collection point. So ultimately, this is a large breakthrough for our company when we realized that there were more options than dead end or cross-flow filtration. and we decided to apply this vortex to microplastics and then to washing machines. But this vortex can also be used for other areas of filtration as well. We've won various awards for its filtration abilities, and we're able to scale it both up and down, and it's patented as well. So we took it and applied it to our external washing machine filter. We did this because it extends the life of the traditional dead end and cross-flow filtration. It's biomimicry inspired by fish, which is kind of cool when you think about a filter that's designed to help nature was also inspired by nature. And it's mechanical design, installed at the washing machine filter outlet. And we ended up designing the product to capture particles down to 50 microns in size. And all of this was done through our lab testing and multiple prototypes. And this is what the external microplastics filter looks like now. So the company was started in about 2022, and we took 2 years or so to kind of lock in our vortex, which was the spiral I just showed, and our conceptual design. And then just about 1 year ago, we officially launched our product for sales in the US and the EU. Designed to install onto all residential washing machines to be able to capture microplastics down to 50 microns in size before they pollute the environment. So we have the mechanical filtration of the vortex or the spiral, and then what sits outside of that is a mesh sleeve made out of stainless steel that's rated to 50 microns in size. On the back of the filter, there are 2 barbs. So you take your existing washing machine outlet hose, it might drain into the floor, the sink, the pipe, and you remove that from wherever it is and plug it onto the filter's inlet. And then the filter comes with a second hose to connect the filter to the outlet. So ultimately, all the water and microplastics and dirt and soap in your washing machine will then flow through your drain hose, through our filter to get filtered out and then back into wherever it's draining. And we also wanted to make this smart app enabled, so you'll see that on the right. But we use an algorithm within the filter to estimate how many loads of laundry a consumer does, which we can then translate to an estimate of how many microplastics they've removed, which I think is something big for sustainability, where it's hard to do something when you don't know the impact it's making. So this is a really great way for people using the filter to feel good about what they're doing and to have an incentive to keep filtering as well. And as I mentioned, we're filtering down to 50 microns in size. We are certified to capture over 90%. So you'll see on the right, we have that filter pod, which is where the vortex pushes everything. And on the top with the white, this is a clean or unused pod. And then on the bottom, you can see all of the captured microplastics. And you'll even see that one kind of long orange fiber right in the middle. That is likely from the sweater I showed earlier in the slides. That bottom image is from a pod just after 5 loads of laundry that was actually in my apartment from my filter that we looked at under the microscope. But what we did to certify the efficiency is we had the Shaw Institute, which is a nonprofit organization based out of Maine, also in the US, fly to our lab and run testing with us. We used flock fiber, which is a standardized nylon particulate that is similar in size to washing machine shed. And we used this to make sure that the test was repeatable and standardized. But we input the flock fiber with additional water to simulate a washing cycle, and we post-filtered the effluent from our filter, comparing it to what we put in. And we ran testing to figure out that we were over 90% efficient down to 50 microns in size. We also tested this at 3 different concentrations. So a little bit of flock, a medium amount, and a lot, because everybody washes different amounts of stuff and different size loads. European washing machines are much smaller capacity than American washing machines. So that's where the over 90% comes from, because it was actually a range of 90% up to 99 or 100% as well throughout this testing. So it's third-party certified. And then in terms of filter maintenance, as I mentioned, this bottom pod was just after 5 loads of laundry. So we ran some testing to figure out that the best time to change the pod was after those 5 loads of laundry to help make sure that no scent or dirt was kind of accumulating over time in the pod. And then the vortex as well that I described comes with a cleaning brush, and that's cleaned based on a bypass for when the filter gets full. And that's just brushed out with a brush that comes with the filter. And then another design thing I want to talk about is that pod. So we talked a little bit about how the vortex was biomimicry inspired, but then our pod had a similar development process as well. So the pod started as a stainless steel cup or collection unit. And again, this needed cleaned out every few loads of laundry. And we did some consumer testing and found that users were really likely to see what comes out, which is really disgusting, microplastics, dirt, shed, and they wanted to wash it right down the sink, which ultimately defeated the purpose of having a filter. So through our consumer testing, we ultimately went to a disposable pod, which is tossed into the household trash or into our CLEANR recycling program. And this just ensured that microplastics would end up in a contained, controlled environment rather than going back into the water. And it takes less than 30 seconds to swap out, which makes it really easy for the consumer to do and very adaptable. For the dryer lint filters, it probably takes 30 seconds to a minute, and that happens every single load of laundry. So we wanted to make sure that this CLEANR pod was less work than the dryer lint filter to make sure that the solution was adaptable. And then additionally, I want to talk about our microplastic impact at scale. So as I mentioned, every single
এমনিতে স্যার আমরা অ্যাডিশনাল স্যাম্পলিং এর কথা বলা আছে যে যদি আমাদের রিসোর্স থাকে তাহলে আমরা অ্যাডিশনাল স্যাম্পলিং
Sorry, you need to wait for the presentation to be over. So Grace, I'll let you continue and then we take the questions afterwards. Thank you.
Oh, Grace, I think we
Grace,
cannot hear you.
yeah,
You're muted. Yeah.
Sorry, thanks.
Yeah,
If
now
your
we can
question's
hear.
important, feel free to go ahead and type it into the chat so that we can revisit it after, and that way you won't forget. But with a little bit about our impact at scale, so as I mentioned, each cycle can release 700,000 to over 1 million microplastics. So for each of us, that impact adds up. Especially when you think about every household doing it. Additionally, we've partnered with colleges and universities in the United States to install our microplastic filters onto their washing machines in the student living accommodations. So our vortex has been scalable, as I mentioned, bigger or smaller, and this filter can be applied in traditional homes or in these creative applications like universities where high volumes of laundry are washed. And for each of us doing laundry, let's say maybe you run 5 loads of laundry per week. In 1 year, you are probably either polluting or removing over 400 million microplastics. And this is a calculator that we have on our website just based on those research articles I posted and also laboratory data we've run on microplastic shed from washing machine. But ultimately, I think it's important to highlight that when we talk about microplastics, it can seem very heavy and concerning. There are lots of articles about the different challenges or concerns with microplastics, and it's important to remember that small actions that we take at home or at university can create a large environmental impact. So I thank you guys for listening to this presentation today. I've listed our website and our general email here on the slide so that if you have any questions that we're not able to address today, I encourage you to reach out or look at our website. But if you all want to, either in the room you're in or in the chat or raise your hand, I'm happy to answer any questions you all have.
Thank you so much.
We have one question in the room.
Yeah. Sorry for the mic.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I
Yes.
can hear you.
Now we can't hear.
You
He's
cannot.
speaking.
Wait.
If there is other question in the Teams,
It's
you can
okay.
raise your hand.
Not working.
We have trouble hearing.
As they work on that, I'll go ahead and answer some of the questions in the chat as well. So Lisa, yes, we designed the filter to be compatible with all residential washing machines in the US and EU. So we have a full testing lab upstairs, the building I'm in, and we have different makes and models and brands of US and European washing machines. So that's how we did our testing. And CLEANR is currently installed in over 29 US states and 10 countries around the world, including Europe. And then for the collected microplastics, right now we recommend 2 different disposal methods. The first is a recycling program with us, where you will take your pods and ship them back to our lab, and we will work with a third-party partner to find something better to do with the microplastics. But in the meantime as well, you can toss them into the trash. So trash and landfill systems in most developed countries, specifically the US, which is where most of our filters are closed loop. So while it's not a perfect solution, I think the area where microplastics pose the most threat is when they're in our water, being tossed around, spread, entering our food chain, reaching every corner of Earth. So keeping them in the landfill helps to make sure that they're contained and not moving around. And then for targeting washing machine users and washing machine companies, great question. So there's been some proposed legislation in France, the EU, the US. I believe in France actually passed a bill originally that would mandate washing machine manufacturers to have a built-in filter. But since the countries are so close together, France had to kind of hold on a second and think about international commerce laws. And so the entire EU and the entire US are having conversations about mandating a filter like this in washing machines. So in the meantime, for consumers who want to start to make an impact now, they can look at our external filter. And as a company, we are in touch with 7 out of the 10 largest global washing machine manufacturers and helping to use the feedback from our external filter and the adaptation of it to push people to integrate the washing machine filter. And we actually have prototypes of our integrated filter in different washing machines in our lab. So that is something that we are working on every day.
Grace, excuse me, can you hear me?
Yes.
So we have a question in the room, and I hope you can hear it.
Let's find out.
Hello, you can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. I have some question on slide 10 because you show the vortex, but I'm not sure where the water go because I saw where the microplastic go, but where the water go, the water that got filtered.
Yep. So the vortex sits like this, and on the outside of it, there is a mesh sleeve. So there's stainless steel mesh on the outside of the vortex that allows clean water to escape through the sides of it, while the microplastics spin around and head towards that pod.
Okay, thank you. Another question: the putting the filter there affects the operation of the washing machine itself, because I imagine blocking the outlet like that would cause some disturbance in flow, maybe.
Yeah, great question. So this was a big concern as we were developing the filter. So the external filter actually has its own pump and tank inside as to not disrupt the washing machine flow or performance. So essentially your washing machine drains into a tank in our filter. So it would be just like draining into a normal drain. And then our tank has sensors to detect the water level and an internal pump so that your washing machine's not doing anything else. And this also allows our filter to then be placed on top of your washing machine or on the floor, because that drain height is less of a concern since there's an integrated pump.
There is okay.
Yeah,
There's
there's
one
one more
question in the
question.
chat. Grace, could you read the questions before you answer, just for the recording, please?
Yes,
Thank
I
you.
can do that. You mentioned the filter is scalable and adaptable. Would the principle also work for sediment or other particles that are heavier than microplastics? Great question. It's not something we've looked too much at. We've looked at some other particles through the fluid modeling, but I don't think they've been heavier than microplastics. But that Raker reduction ratio and the different sizing of the vortex, we could adjust that rib distance, and it also would depend on the velocity or the speed of what's moving through it. So I do think it would be possible, but it's not something we've looked too much into at this time.
Thank you very much, Grace, for your presentation and answering the questions.
Yes, thank you.
I think it's time now for the other speaker, Guillaume. So I'll let you to introduce him, Laura, if you want, or
Yes, I think you can start, Guillaume.
Guillaume, the floor is yours.
Yeah.
If you
Thank
hear
you.
us.
Exactly.
Yeah, I do. So I will share my screen.
Perfect. We see the presenter mode.
You see the presenter mode. That's perfect. I don't have the pointer, but can you see my mouse or?
Yes.
Yes, we can see your mouse.
Okay, so we'll do it like this. So welcome to my presentation. So I'm very happy to see also that a lot of people are interested in this topic, and I will try to do my best to make an interesting presentation where we can learn something. So my name is Guillaume Crosset-Perrotin. I am a PhD student at ETH Zurich, Eawag. So Eawag is the research institute in Switzerland that is dedicated to water. And in this talk, I will try to give you an overview of what I did during my PhD in a very concise way, as much as I can. Okay. Yes. So I'd like to start my presentation with actually this figure that I took from a review. So what you see here on this figure are box plots of reported concentration of microplastics in different types of water. So you have on the x-axis, you see the wastewater treatment effluent, influent, the lakes, etc., etc. And I would like you to take a look at the y-axis and notice that it's a logarithmic axis. And this is really striking because this means that what we see here is that in most water matrices, we really have huge variability. And maybe because we are talking about microplastics, it's a bit difficult to grasp what it means. So I decided to make an example with maybe another pollutant that you may know from wastewater or from water quality in general, ammonium. So if you look at the lowest value, for example, in a wastewater treatment effluent, that would correspond to, let's say, 1 microgram of ammonium per liter. And if you look at the largest, then this would correspond to 10 kilograms of ammonium per liter. And this range, this just simply doesn't make sense. I mean, even if you have different processes, if you have some temporary variability, industries, this simply doesn't make sense. So this means that there's another issue, and actually the other issue, spoiler, is that we don't have very good methods to evaluate the microplastics in the environment in general. I took another figure. This is again a compilation of different concentration of microplastics in atmospheric deposition. And again, it's a logarithmic axis. And again, you see that the reported concentration span over several orders of magnitude. And this is really a problem because this means that we don't really have a robust method to evaluate this microplastic concentration. So every lab has its own way of doing the thing. And because of that, we have a lot of different results, and it's impossible to compare study and to evaluate which sources are relevant, which pathways are relevant for microplastics into the environment. So that's why a few years ago, the PIs in my project decided to come together. So several research institutes in Switzerland joined forces to hire 3 PhD students that would develop methods together to measure microplastics in atmospheric deposition, in soil, and in wastewater treatment plants. So this is what I'm going to talk about today, and more recently also about alpine and Arctic fresh snow. And the idea behind that is that we would develop the methods together, and we would measure in all these matrices with the same method so that we can really compare apples with apples. Okay, so before I really talk about what I did during my PhD, I would like to give you a bit of context about the wastewater treatment in Switzerland. You may not be familiar with it. So the typical target pollutants in the context of large wastewater treatment plants are typically carbon pollution. So this is traditionally biological and chemical oxygen demand. There's also total suspended solids, phosphorus, some of the nitrogen species, so ammonium, so basically most of the plants are equipped with the nitrification step. Soon it will be also total nitrogen. And something that is quite unique for Switzerland is that we treat dissolved organic micropollutants such as pharmaceuticals and pesticides. And as far as I know, this is, I think it only happens, it's also the case in Germany, but other than that, this is very unique. So this is done through activated carbon filtration or an ozonation followed by a sand filter. This is relevant for later in the presentation. And Grace mentioned that most plastics in wastewater treatment plants accumulate in sludge. That's perfectly correct. And in Switzerland, sludge is it's basically prohibited to use it as a fertilizer, and it is completely incinerated. And I think it's also pretty unique in the world. So I think most countries still allow partial application of sludge on field. Now, if we think about microplastics, well, there's no regulation at the moment for microplastics. And as far as I know, there's nothing planned, at least for Switzerland. And one of the reasons for that is that simply it comes down to what I explained at the beginning of the presentation. There's no method to measure plastics, so we don't really know how much is emitted by wastewater treatment plants. We are not really able to measure them, so it doesn't really make sense to regulate something that we are simply not able to measure. To give you also a very brief overview of what we know about microplastics in wastewater treatment plants, I like to show you this picture or this figure here. This is again a review that compiled reported concentration at different stages of the wastewater treatment plant. Again, it's a logarithmic axis, and what we see is that there's a constant decrease along the treatment train. So, of course, here we are looking at the median, so it's not 95%, but typically what you expect from a wastewater treatment plant set, you would have 95% removal rate of microplastics. And this actually makes sense because you have, in wastewater treatment plants, you have bar screens, you have primary clarifier, you have a secondary clarifier, sometimes sand filter. So wastewater treatment plants are designed to remove particles, and microplastics are particles. And as Grace mentioned, so most microplastics are not degraded, they simply accumulate in sludge. And we had some hypotheses about what's the extract mechanism, but this is something that I really tackled in my PhD, and I will talk about it a bit later. And again, there's a large variability in the concentration reported in the literature. So this is also challenging. So the two things together, the fact that we have a very high removal rate, but at the same time, a large variability, makes us really wonder, well, okay, but are these wastewater treatments really important contributors of microplastics pollution into the environment? And I think this is really the overarching question that I try to tackle in my PhD. So to give you a bit the objectives that the objectives of my PhD. So the first was to develop a method to measure microplastics in the emissions of microplastics by wastewater treatment plants, and specifically to assess measuring microplastics in sludge to derive what would come out in the effluent. And this is super counterintuitive, but I'll try to explain it a bit later, and I hope that it will make sense for you. Second point was to try to evaluate the temporal variability of microplastics concentration in wastewater treatment plants. The idea is that if you have some temporal trends, but you can only take a few samples per year. You don't want to, you want to have representative samples, and you don't want to make extrapolation at a time where you underestimate or overestimate. And the third work package was to simply evaluate how much microplastics are emitted by the Swiss wastewater treatment plants, and then compare the resulting data with the colleagues from the consortium I introduced before. So let's talk about the method. So bear with me at the beginning. It's maybe a bit confusing, but it will make sense. So first, we did some experiments to understand what was actually happening to the microplastics when they were in the activated sludge process. So I basically added some microplastics in some beakers in the lab and let them react with sludge. And what we noticed is that very quickly the plastics were sticking to the sludge flux, so forming so-called heteroagglomerates. That's what you see on the pictures on the right. So you may see, I don't know if it's very good on if what you see is very good, but you see some green bright dots and also some kind of a darker background corresponding to the flux. And you may see that all these green bright dots corresponding to fluorescent microplastics, they are associated with the flux, and there's nothing on the, let's say, lighter background corresponding to the background of the microscope. The picture below is the same, so you see one microplastics that I added that is sticking or which is enmeshed in the flux. So this means that after the activated sludge, these plastics, microplastics sludge heteroagglomerates are going to go in the secondary clarifier, and they are going to sediment together and thus lead to the removal of the microplastics from the wastewater and accumulation in sludge. But it may happen that some flux leave the wastewater treatment plant. So this means that all the microplastics that are leaving the wastewater treatment plants are still attached to the flux, and there's therefore a very good correlation between the amount of total suspended solids discharged by the wastewater treatment plants and the amount of microplastics also discharged by the wastewater treatment plants. So if I summarize a bit what I said, let's consider an activated sludge system and a secondary clarifier. In this case, you have three beads, colored beads corresponding to the plastics, and three brown thingy corresponding to the flux. So in this case, we would have a ratio of microplastics to flux to of 1. Most of them are going to be removed in the sludge, and some of them are going to hitchhike with the flux and go to the surface water. And in the effluent or in the surface water, this ratio of microplastics per flux per TSS is essentially the same than in sludge. And this is really the key point and why we were interested in doing this experiment. We want to take advantage of this ratio here, because the thing is that I didn't tell you so far, if you want to evaluate how much is emitted by the effluent of the wastewater treatment plants, you have to do a dead-end filtration. And that means you have to filter tens or hundreds of liters to accumulate enough plastics to have a representative sample. So instead, what we thought is that, well, if we have this ratio, the ratio of microplastics to TSS is the same in the sludge and in the effluent, and if we know how much TSS is emitted by the plant, which is something that is typically measured by the wastewater treatment plant operators, why not simply sample in the activated sludge? And the idea is that, well, in terms of TSS, the activated sludge is 600 times more concentrated than the effluent, and it's also always mixed and aerated, so you can expect that the plastics are more homogeneously distributed in the tank, which may not be the case in the effluent. And last but not least, as I told you, it's really, sorry for the words, it's pain in the ass to filter in the effluent water, but if you just take a grab sample of activated sludge, it's very quick and very easy. So this was the general idea. Now, how do we actually measure these plastics from our samples? So first we have our sample. We do different steps. It takes about 1 week to extract the plastics from the organic matrix, and we deposit them on a filter that looks like that. Then we do an analysis with focal plane array micro Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy. Takes also 1 day per sample. I also want you to get an idea of how challenging and how long these analyses take. And then with the FPA micro FTIR, you basically get a lot of spectra of the particles on the filter, so basically chemical information, and you can match the spectra with database to be able to say, oh, this particle is a plastic and this is, I don't know, an organic particle, whatever, pollen or something else. So then you get a number of microplastic particles, and you can do some assumptions on the shape of the particle and on its density to derive the mass. And something that I just mentioned briefly, but that is really key in this field of microplastics research, is that we have very good quality assurance, quality control. So we do a lot of blanks. We add in all of our samples some microplastics with specific colors and specific shapes, and we basically we know how much we add and we know how much we have at the end of the analysis, so we can calculate some kind of a recovery to be able to say, oh, during the sample processing we may have lost I don't know, 30% of the plastics, and be able to correct for that. And last but not least, for each of these steps, we try to quantify the uncertainty associated to be able to say, okay, we measure 100 plastics, plus minus 1, plus minus 10, plus minus 100 or more. And spoiler, the uncertainty is very high, so we are at about 100% uncertainty. And I know that it sounds high, but this is simply the way it is, and we can try to reduce a bit, but I think it's going to be difficult, and all labs are dealing with these uncertainties. It's just very important to quantify them to then be able to communicate the confidence on our results. Good. So now the second part of my PhD was to try to evaluate the temporal variability of microplastics concentrations. So I considered one advanced wastewater treatment plant, so with an activated sludge system and an ozonation reactor with a sand filter. So this is basically one of these new steps to get rid of the pharmaceuticals. I sampled in activated sludge directly in the effluent of the secondary clarifier, in the effluent of the sand filter, so what is released in the water and in the digester. Took one sample per month and did a year-long sampling campaign. So this was the main goal, to evaluate this temporal variability. And at the same time, it was also to validate this idea that the ratio of microplastics per mass of total suspended solids is the same in the activated sludge and in the effluent of the activated sludge, because so far we only did some lab experiments, so it may not be the same at full scale. So the results are the following. So on the x-axis, basically the time, and on the y-axis, the concentration of microplastics expressed as a number per gram of total suspended solids. And you can first focus on the blue line and on the green line. So the blue line is the concentration of microplastics in activated sludge, and the green line is the concentration of microplastics in the effluent of the activated sludge. And what we see is that we essentially, so there's a bit of variability, sure, but essentially this is the same concentration. So this validates this idea that there's really an efficient heteroagglomeration, and that the particles leaving the wastewater treatment plants are actually attached to the flux. What it also means that if you have an efficient TSS removal, you will also remove a very important chunk of the microplastics. So if you have, I don't know, an ultrafiltration or reverse osmosis or whatever, you will also remove a significant amount. The second thing that we see is that you don't really have a variability or seasonality in the microplastics concentration along the year, which was quite interesting, because we kind of thought maybe in winter people are wearing more synthetic clothes, so it may be different. So this means that we can do extrapolation based on a limited number of samples, and we will we will have results that do not deviate too much from the average. Then I also mentioned that these wastewater treatment plants had an advanced treatment step with an ozonation reactor and sand filter. We had a sampling point before and after, so we can calculate the removal. So if we look at the removal efficiency in terms of number and mass of microplastics, then we reach on average 99%. So it is super efficient, and this also means that these steps that are now being implemented also in the European Union, although they are not designed to remove microplastics, they will remove a significant amount of them. So now, the last chapter of my thesis. So The goal was to evaluate how much microplastics are emitted by the Swiss wastewater treatment plants. So I went myself to 51 of these plants. They treat collectively 44% of the wastewater produced by the Swiss population. And I took some grab samples of activated sludge and applied the method that I described a bit earlier. So the results are the following. So there's a lot of information. The x-axis basically corresponds to the name of the wastewater treatment plants. This is not so relevant, and the y-axis is the concentration of microplastics in terms of number per mass of sludge. The different colors corresponds to different polymer types, the different types of microplastics. I didn't add all the abbreviation. This is also not so relevant. But so what we see on this plot is that we have a variability in terms of concentration of approximately 1 to 20,000 microplastics per gram of TSS. So sure, there's a bit of variability, but if you remember the 6 or 7 orders of magnitude I was mentioning at the beginning, we are really far from that. And I think this makes sense. So when you use the same method for different wastewater treatment plants, then you have more or less consistent results. Second thing that I want you to look at is that we have different colors, but these are systematically the same for all the different wastewater treatment plants. So we always find the same polymer types in all wastewater treatment plants, which I find kind of interesting, because this kind of means that we have in all the different catchments it seems that we have the same sources of microplastics. And last but not least, you may have noticed these very high peak bars. I may not be able to explain all of them, but for the one in Schaffhausen, Neuhausen, so this one here, it turns out that they are using some of these plastic carriers to enhance their treatment capabilities. And these are also made of PP, so these pink bars. So we kind of suspect that these carriers disintegrate over time and release microplastic. Okay, so I come to the end of my presentation. Now that we have this data, we know how much we can use the TSS emission to surface water, TSS emission by wastewater treatment plants to evaluate how much microplastics are emitted. And if we do the extrapolation for the whole Switzerland, we arrive to approximately 5 tons per year emitted, and or corresponding to 3 times 10 to the power 13 microplastics per year. If we divide it by the number of people connected to these wastewater treatment plants, this is approximately 5 million microplastics emitted per capita per year, or 0.5 grams per capita per year. And now comes a bit the beauty of the consortium that we built. So now I can compare with the results of my colleague Narain, who measured the microplastics in the atmospheric depositions, and he estimated that approximately 10 tons per year are deposited directly on the surface water. So this does not account for the fact that you may have deposition on the roads or on nearby water, and during rain events they are washed out or running off to surface water. So what I want to tell you with this is that in the end, the main pathways for microplastics to the environment may not be wastewater treatment plants, but it may come from other sources, because what you find in the atmospheric deposition is basically particles that were in the environment and that were resuspended. So it may be because you left a plastic bottle in the environment, it degraded, got resuspended, etc. So it might be the case that littering is a more important source, for example. But this is still something we have to think about. So my last slide, few key take-home messages. So first, I hope that you are now convinced that microplastics quantification is not an easy task. I also showed you that the microplastics are very well removed from wastewater and they accumulate in sludge through the formation of heteroagglomerates. We didn't observe clear temporal trends in microplastic concentrations in the wastewater treatment plants. The emission of microplastics by wastewater treatment plants are about 0.5 grams per capita per year, or 5 tons per year. And finally, so the wastewater treatment plants may not be the most important contributor to microplastics pollution in the environment. So we could think maybe about combined sewer overflows or other sources. This is things that are, well, I won't be there to do it, but the future students may look into. So I would like to acknowledge my team. Feel free also to reach out to me if you have additional questions. And I also take advantage of this to make a bit of advertisement. So there are many master projects open, and or if you're a PhD student who is interested in doing an exchange at Eawag, also please reach out to me, and we can discuss, or I can put you in contact with my supervisor. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Guillaume, for your presentation. And as we are running out of time, I think we're all going to take 2 questions maximum. So first, is there a question in the room? There's no question in the room, so.
There is one hand that's raised in the chat. I don't see your name. I think it's Makuza. Maybe you can tell your question.
Yes, good day, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. Thank you so much for the interesting presentation. I specifically joined because I'm also doing a PhD in microplastics. So I've got 2 questions. The first one is, when you say that wastewater treatment plants are removing microplastics, is it dependent on which maybe wastewater treatment plant? And then number 2, a quantification of these microplastics. Since you did mention that it is not an easy task, I'm yet to start with my data collection and lab work. So I just wanted to get insights from you as someone who has done it. How long did it take for you, and things like that? So maybe you can give me an example with mine, an example with like the first sampling event. I am going to collect roughly 24 samples. So how long would that take me to process and quantify? Thank you so much.
So for the second question, I suggest that you write me an email directly, and then we can talk about it, just the 2 of us. For the first question, regarding the different types of processes, so there's definitely some differences. I mean, as I highlighted, so in my second work packages, so the plant was equipped with sand filter, then you have 99% removal rate, and not all wastewater treatment plants are equipped with sand filter, so this makes a difference. But I would say in general, most of the plants who have, let's say, just a primary clarifier and a standard activity sludge, they are more or less the same. I wouldn't say there are drastic differences between the different wastewater treatment plants.
All right. Thank you so much. I will send the email.
Sure.
Thank you. Then we have another person who raised their hand. I think it's Anyonka Yemi.
Hello, Yemi.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, my name is Yemi. Guillaume, thanks for your presentation. Quite interesting and great work that you've been doing in the past. Well, quickly, I just wanted to ask, maybe you can add 1 or 2 words to what kind of digestion protocol you use for your sludge before preparing it for the FCR analysis.
Mm-hmm. So, good question. I skipped it to save some time. So the idea is that you have to dissolve or to get rid of the organic matrix without destroying the plastic. So you cannot use acids, you cannot use bases. So you use what we typically use in our lab is strong oxidant, so hydrogen peroxide, the Fenton reaction. But I know that you know a bit of this. So and on the top of that, we do also density separation. So this is basically because in wastewater treatment plants, we have a lot of sand, and the plastics are lighter than the sand. So you add a liquid where the sand would sediment, but the plastics would remain on the top. So you can basically purify your samples like that. So this is the 2 main steps that we are doing.
Okay. And what is the pore size of the filter that you use?
20 microns, the lowest.
20 micron. Okay. Yeah, all right. Let's give room for others.
Thank you very much,
Okay.
guys. So as I said, as we are running out of time, you can ask your questions to the speakers directly by email and discuss it later. So I'll let you, Laura, conclude the the webinar.
It's me, but
Yeah, I think Penelope has some slides.
Yeah,
But
Penelope has the
Guillaume,
slides, sorry.
we will get in touch with these questions with you.
Mhm.
Also, if you have other questions to Grace, feel free to write them in the chat, and then we will come back to you. Yeah.
Laura,
yes.
I don't know if it's possible, but I'm free now. So if people want to, I don't know if it's possible for if people want to stay,
Yeah.
I can also answer more questions.
What we're going to do is that I'm just going to give the general final information, and for the people who can stay, Guillaume can answer a few questions. So just so that you know, on the screen you have some QR codes to access the Astee Eawag Water Professional LinkedIn page, where we give information like we did today for this event, for this webinar. And you also have access to the VSA Young Professional LinkedIn page. Also, I put my email if you guys need any information like accessing this recording or just general question, feel free to contact me. And just to tell you that after this exchange, you will receive a satisfaction survey that's very important for us for you to fill out because it can help us upgrade our events. And I also wanted to take the time to thank everyone who has joined this webinar, who has asked questions. I want to say a big thank you to both our speakers, Guillaume and Grace, especially Grace because she has a big time difference, but she made sure to be here and give a very clear and super interesting presentation. Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a nice
Thank you,
evening or
everyone.
day.
Thank you, everyone.